Good afternoon. Hi, Evie. Are you with me?
Where am I?
You froze there for a while. I can hear you now.
Yeah, okay. I'm back on track. I
Back on
think.
track. Yeah, it's your signal looks a little bit sticky, so I'm just letting you know you're kind of coming and going. So yeah, just to be
Okay.
aware.
I hope it's going to get better. I just did something I should have done like 5 minutes ago, but okay. What can you do?
Hey ho, hey ho.
I
It's
was so
all free
excited to
flowing.
come out here with you, Yvonne, like every Thursday, like always.
Oh my goodness. Always a pleasure, always a pleasure. And for anyone who's watching, hi and welcome. Anyone who watches on replay, I hope that you get something from this conversation and the previous ones that we've held. And this week, we are exploring I Am Not Enough through the lens of the pleaser. And Evie and I were just talking about this before we came on live about the pleaser, and I certainly know in my work the pleaser shows up a lot for the majority, I would even say, of my clients, and I can definitely see where the pleaser has played out for me, although I would kind of say that was quite a long time ago, and kind of much less now. But Evie, perhaps you want to kick off. This is one that I know you're familiar with too. So what is it? What is it about the pleaser?
Well, I think as women, because of our conditioning, from like the younger we are, the more I think we want to fit in, and the pleaser goes very much hand in hand with this type of sense. As we grow older, we are a bit more like individualistic. Can you hear me? I can see
Yes.
myself a bit. Okay. So we become a bit more ourselves, and I think at that stage we stop being so much of a pleaser. However, I was just wondering earlier, it's like, when I was thinking about this discussion, if there are not only stages but also certain relationships where the pleaser keeps showing up more than like generally. And that could be the case as well, depending on what kind of relationship we have, let's say with our partner, what kind of relations we have with our parents, with our kids, so many different things.
Yeah.
So definitely it shows up in various parts of, like not only stages of our lives, but the different relationships. That's how I see it.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think as with all of the saboteurs, that it is rooted into the conditioning of that kind of happens in our childhood. And interestingly, I was talking to somebody this week who was describing her relationship with her mother, and her mother had always been incredibly demanding, and you do as you're told, and you shut up unless you're spoken to. Very harsh, full-on rules that really made her kind of go into herself. So she would only speak when she was spoken to. She would do anything and everything to get her mother's attention and to get a sense of warmth or love from her. Thus began her journey into being a pleaser. Like, I know if I say all the right things and if I do all the right things, then I get this. I'm rewarded with a word of kindness, or I might, if I'm really lucky, get a hug, or I might get a thank you. And that has, now that's from her childhood, and here she is in her 50s, just about to start unpacking that behavior, and really understanding that it has been, like a kind of a monkey on her back for all this time, not realizing just how deeply rooted it was, not realizing just how much it was coming out, and actually just saying, oh, it's just the way that I am, which is what most of us say when we look at these behaviors. Oh, that's just the way I am. It's like, well, actually, no, it's a conditioning that's happened, and it is a pattern that is playing out in your life, and it's playing out in your relationships. It's playing out how you treat yourself, because obviously she came to me because she wanted to speak about the struggle she has with prioritizing herself. Well, she's never prioritized herself in her life. She has never put herself first. So the whole concept of that is alien. And she's it's like, me first, me look after me, make time for me before I do XYZ for everybody else. How is that even possible? So I believe that pleaser is just another one of the saboteurs, deeply rooted. And I was trying to rummage around myself and thinking, where have I seen that in me? And I think sort of in my late teens, when I was trying to, I'm going to say, find myself, find a bit of who I was, that really came up. That actually, when somebody said something nice or did something nice, then my job was to please them so that I could have more of that. I definitely can see how that came up for me. Thankful to say that that's not the way that I operate, but the pleaser still resides. However, how it shows up now and when it shows up is very few and far between. And I think, like you said, for me, my pleaser may show up in certain situations or relationships where I am choosing to please. So it's a little bit different than when the pleaser is just showing up anyway, and the pleaser is just running the show because that's what it feels it needs to do to protect you and keep you safe. For me, that's not really what I experience now. What about you, Evie?
Yeah, no, I mean, I have, like, I can see the pleaser sticking its head out occasionally, even now. But I am more aware of it now, and I can say, okay, I need to put certain barriers and make sure that I do what I want to do up to that extent and not overdo it. Because you see, the interesting thing is that anyone that has the pleaser would think that okay, that's a very good thing, and they might confuse the pleaser with being polite, with being being giving, being all these things. However, when you overdo it, you don't really serve the person that you're doing it to, and let alone yourself, of course. And when I first found out about that, I was like, oh, I had never thought about it like this. Because when you are over pleasing somebody, it means that as a friend, you're not going to tell them the hard truths. As a friend, you're not going to show up like authentically. And there is so much that you can show up like this and be a real friend.
Indeed.
So, and people start seeing you in a very suspicious way. And the more you want to please somebody, the more they probably keep you at an arm's length because of this. So it becomes a vicious cycle. And of course, it creates such a big problem in your own head, because you cannot understand why somebody doesn't respond the way you expect with all this pleasing that you have done. So yeah, definitely, like everything, it needs to be in
And the other side,
moderation.
yeah, absolutely, yeah, 100%. And the other part of that, Evie, though, is that you will have people who will kind of push back, because it's just like, this person is just kind of a little bit too much of a giver, just giving me too much of everything, and kind of that brings a sense of discomfort. Then on the other side, you'll have people that will just take complete advantage, and then you become, was the term we used to use, is like a doormat. It's like people will just walk all over you. They will and they will not appreciate the things that you are doing. They will expect them. There is a real big difference between doing something and somebody's really appreciative and thankful, and somebody who just expects you to keep on doing it because you've been doing it for so long. And and why is your behavior changing now? You've been doing this all the time. You've been doing and meeting my needs all this time. It's almost like, how dare you now stop that? What often happens for the pleaser, though, is as, even if you don't want to acknowledge it, the internal sensations are resentment. It's just like,
Yeah.
I'm just doing and giving, and there's just like I'm pouring out of me all the time. Why isn't somebody pouring back into me? Well, one, because you're not allowing them to, because you're just so busy pouring out to everybody else, and very likely to say, oh no, I'm fine, oh no, I've got all of the wording that can dress up that you don't need any attention or help. So it's either that you're just kind of so busy outpouring, people don't think that you need anything, which is kind of like masking yourself, um, or people genuinely think that you have got everything down pat and therefore you don't need any help. Meanwhile, those rumblings of resentment that are coming up in you are real. And whilst they may be occurring, let's say, in one relationship where you are pouring lots in and not getting anything back, that's also trickling out into your other relationships and the other areas of your life. So I think it's really important to be able to recognize, when I'm doing things for people, am I doing them because I genuinely want to? Like, this is a heart-centered, I want to do this thing. I'm not expecting anything.
Right.
I'm just doing it from that heart-centered place. Or am I doing it because I want the attention, I want the acceptance, I want to see and feel heard? You need to really just ask those questions without judgment. So we're not trying to invite the judge out to play, who will, trust me, will
Never.
definitely be putting that head out looking for the opportunity. So it's really being able to ask yourselves those questions without then trying to beat yourself up on whatever the outcome is from the answers, because all you're doing in that stage is just inviting yet another saboteur out to play, and that helps nothing.
Absolutely. And what you really said there is you become invisible more and more when you are a pleaser, because your needs are not met. And the resentment is that, I mean, why people don't see what I want, what I need. And you cannot really understand that you're the one that is causing this invisibility with, the actions. And I love what you said about, the question is, are you doing it without expecting something, or are you doing it for validation? Because if you do it for validation, then be aware that's your pleaser. It has absolutely nothing to do with being kind, with being giving, with being any of those things. It has to clearly do with you wanting to be accepted. And it's a very different situation.
Yeah.
But if you do something and you do it from the heart without expecting anything, then it is more likely that you're going to get way more of what you want. And then some, actually.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's that there is that belief that comes with it that pleasing others will earn love, will earn acceptance, and that actually without that I am not enough. So that very thing, that very topic of exploring I am not enough, is, well, if people aren't loving me and if they're not accepting me, then I'm clearly not enough. Therefore, I must do more. How I see that play out in my work is that this is how so many of my clients end up burning out, end up neglecting their self-care. It's like, gosh, I wish I had time to do X, Y, and Z. I wish I had, but I've got all these other people that I need to serve. There's all these other things I must do first. And it's that need to put everyone and everything first that I think is almost like the first question. What is driving you to put everything and everyone first? What is the thing that's driving you to do that? And I remember doing, I think when I was doing my little survey on LinkedIn, and I was kind of having these little one-to-one chats with women, and one particular woman, and I will never forget, because it was just so beautiful to hear her have her a little aha moment. And she was saying, yes, of course, self-care is important. Yes, we should all be taking time for self-care. And then she said, but, I've got a family, there's my husband, there's my work. So she listed all the reasons why there is distance between her and her self-care. And she reeled off this list. And then at the end she went, and although I couldn't see her, I could feel her literally sit back in her seat. And she went, and now I have to ask myself, why are they more important than me? Because she clearly hadn't. She clearly hadn't given any consideration to why this was happening. She was just doing it. It was just, this is what I've been told. This is how I should be. I am here to do for everybody, and nobody has told me to do for me up until this moment. That hadn't even been on her radar. So it's interesting that we can sometimes just get so caught up in these patterns of operation. We just don't separate ourselves from them. We cannot see how they are being destructive. It's just like, no, this is just how I am. This is how my life is. This is what's expected of me. And we don't stop to question that. So I kind of always love that moment. I love that story because as I said, I couldn't see her, but I could almost feel her physicality change when she suddenly thought, but hold on a moment. Why are they more important than me? She hadn't even got there. So for me, the pleaser, in kind of looking at the pleaser, if the pleaser is prevalent in the way that you're being, is to question, what is it about meeting everybody else's needs and requirements above your own that is important? Why is that important? Why does that really matter to you? And why do you matter less? Why did your needs matter less? And if your needs do matter less, who do you think is going to meet them?
Wow. That's a fantastic question. I think anyone that actually asks honestly that, then they will have a very, very good answer for themselves, and they won't need anything else to any other explanation. And I hope that our discussions here really bring that aha moment for the women that hear us, because at the end of the day, we are the ones that are responsible for our own well-being.
Yes.
And another thing that affects women more than men in this particular area is that we tend naturally to do more for others because we are nurturers. So it sort of feels okay and natural and expected and so many things. And like we really don't stop for 1 minute to say, okay, what about me? And why is it so bad to say, what about me? Because a lot of us, we don't even want to think about that because that is so selfish.
Yeah, exactly. And there comes the story of the selfishness of looking after self. Interestingly, though, and I kind of always want to play with this word of nurture, and we're natural nurturers. I'm just like, well, says who? Where is it written that we are? And I certainly know women who are incredibly nurturing. I mean, it just oozes out of every pore. Equally, I know some women who actually nurturing is not what I would identify as a strong part of who they are. That's the right one. It's not what I would identify as a strong part of who they are. And I'm just like, that doesn't make them any less a woman. That doesn't make them any less somebody who has patterns and things going on. But it's so the nurturing part. The nurturing for me is just such an interesting thing. I love the word nurture, and it's a word that I use a lot. I just feel we need to be really careful not to assume that every woman wants to even be identified as a nurturer, because not all of them do, and that's okay too. What do you think about that, Evie?
Well, absolutely. I mean, but we don't need to identify as that. And at the end of the day, you need to, I mean, if you want to be a nurturer, fantastic. But again, ask the question, am I doing it for validation? Am I doing it because it's expected? Am I doing it for all these things? Or am I doing it because, yes, I genuinely want to look after my child, my husband, my mother, my whoever, or my friend, and I don't expect anything else out of that. It's like a natural thing that I do, and I get pleasure out of that. I mean, that's a very different story then. Then you're not really a pleaser in that sense. You're a pleaser that pleases themselves as well.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that's a good thing. So I mean, when it comes to the saboteurs, we all know they have that good side, the side that we need to keep and understand it, and the one that can serve us. So
Absolutely.
what I don't
And the
agree,
strengths of, sorry, go on,
yeah.
Evie.
So no, with the one thing I don't agree is, like, keep telling the same story that doesn't necessarily, it doesn't serve you, and you don't even know why it doesn't serve you. You haven't really unpacked it for yourself. If you do, and that's who you are, fabulous. And that's why the judge shouldn't really take part in these discussions. You need to
Mhm.
openly and
Oh, yeah.
honestly speak with yourself, and understand why you're doing the things you're doing.
Yeah. 100%. And that kind of leads really nicely into, the community that we are going to be holding space for next year, so that we can speak together. Because actually having a conversation with yourself may not be comfortable for some people. I'm happy talking to myself. I'm not so sure everybody is. So, having a
Yeah.
community that is a safe space where you can talk these things through and really start to identify, well, what is it that keeps on making me do this? Autopilot is strong. I just want to underline that. Our autopilots are strong. They have been educated, they are embedded, they are deeply rooted, which is why sometimes it feels really difficult when we even think about the potential of change. And yet there are ways to make that change happen. And we don't have to traumatize ourselves with everything that has happened in life to do that. Some people can cope with that and others can't. But we do need to understand the patterns that have been created that make us do the things we do, think the things we think, feel the things we feel. And yet here we are. And when we look at the pleaser, again, we need to honor those underlying strengths which exist, because the pleasing person is empathetic. They're loving and they're giving. They're tuned into other people's feelings and needs. That's why sometimes they can help somebody without even necessarily having the person tell them that something's not right. They just automatically do it because they are that sensitive. They can pick up on that. They have high emotional intelligence. All of these things are brilliant and wonderful. However, when we identify the pleaser has taken all of those strengths and amplified them. And now it's out of control. And what
Absolutely.
it's not doing is turning those strengths back on self. So where's the self empathy? Where's the love for self? Where's the meeting of own needs? They just don't show up, because the pleaser is like on the rampage, all about everything outside of self. Um, and we know that that's debilitating to health. And I'm sure, Evie, in your work, that must be debilitating in career, surely.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because then it's like like Claudia is saying on the comment here, the don't deserve bit. That really shows up a lot, because you see, when we are pleasers, it means that conditionally we expect something. So it is the same thing when like we expect the conditions to change, so we deserve the better career, the like the getting back to work, the being the like in the right place, being deserving of good managers, and so on and so forth. Or good, not good manager, yeah, being deserving of, like, the managers treating us the right way, whatever. So we perpetuate that pleasing thing, and we don't necessarily show up authentically. And people are like, within teams, you can feel this person, you can really see that something is going on, that it repels you instead of like attracting you, because it also, pleasing shows up, especially within teams in business, more from the area of how do you call it, the need of being accepted for
Yes.
what you do, not being accepted of who you are. So it becomes, a very like almost being. I'm looking for a word here, like really desperate. That's the word. Like, so when pleasing shows up from desperation, especially in a team, it's the most repellent thing, and it's very hard to manage this when you
Yes.
are in that state, because you clearly cannot see it right there and then. You need to work and unpack it to actually be able to realize what's happening. But again, as you said, from a young age, you get into this cycle because somebody has taught you that in order to be accepted, in order to be seen, in order to be deserving, you must do certain things. So there is a condition involved with everything, which is the biggest lie ever.
Yeah.
But hey,
Yeah.
that's where we are.
Yeah. Well, we've been saying, haven't we, throughout the weeks that, all of these saboteurs are filled with lies, because the whole thing of like, I am not enough unless, and whatever the saboteur is telling you, these are all lies, because you were born enough, you are enough, and that's the absolute truth and fact. The fact that fact is lying underneath these layers of lies, because given that we have more than one saboteur, there are layers of lies. So even if we, and actually that's important to remember, because even if we focus on, if I say, my pleaser is like running rampant at the moment, and I may work on getting my pleaser in order, there may be another saboteur that is bringing up the same things in a different way. So interestingly, I had a conversation, I think it was yesterday, and the person was saying, she said, I feel like no sooner has one layer gone, there's another layer. I said, because there probably is. Because there is another story, there's another pattern that is still playing out. And, I think it's important to acknowledge the saboteurs never, ever disappear. They don't just suddenly go off and never to be seen again. They are constantly there. But as we work on them, as we build our mental fitness, as we become better at recognizing and quietening them, the volume of them and the size of them, if you think of them being giants when they're running rampant, is what we're doing is we're just doing this. We're just bringing them into this place where we instantly recognize them, then we can instantly do something about it. Whereas before, they're just running rampant on a daily basis, autopilot, no recognition. This is who I am. This is how I behave. This is how I think. This is how I feel. Right. And so just that stopping to question is a critical part of being able to identify the patterns that are happening. And being able to do it without going into judgment, which is a massive thing, because the judge, again, will just come out and throw shade, because that's what the judge does.
But that's the thing. I mean, it is okay, if you had to deal with just one at a time, it would be okay. But because most of the times we are like in patterns that involve more than one saboteurs, and the judge on top of that. It is hard work. It's not like okay, I know there are so many saboteurs. That's what I'm calling them, and Said's coming out and saving the day, and that's it. I wish it was like that, but it wasn't. It isn't. And the good thing though is that because we are learning about our Saids, and because we are learning that we can, and we give ourselves permission to be able to do without
Yes.
judgment, and we can slowly understand that this is not us. And I think that that is the key. It's like really disassociating ourselves from the patterns that we've found ourselves being in our, like, the years that have passed.
Yes.
It is natural for us to say, oh, this is me, that's what I do, and what have you. But if there is something you don't like, or about what any of these saboteurs do, the easiest way out is to just call them out. Say, okay, I do this because, of course, the saboteurs are part of me, but I choose to think that it's two of us, so now I can manage it differently. And I think that is the fastest way out of the pattern.
Yeah.
And managing it. I don't know. I mean, that's how I deal with this. What do you think,
Yeah.
Yvonne?
Well, I think also that, if we look at the whole, the power of positive intelligence is that it is about growing that mental fitness. So for me, somebody who comes from a health and fitness background, I've been in health and fitness or around it for 40 years. I know that if I go to the gym once, nothing much is going to happen other than I'll probably feel sore for a couple of days, right? But nothing's going to happen if I go once. If I go once a week, over a long period of time, I will probably start to feel a little bit different, a little bit better. But if I'm consistently going 2-3 times a week and I am seeing the progress and I'm putting effort into what I'm doing, I'm going to see some results. I know it because I've done it. I know it because it happens. And exactly the same is true for our mental fitness. How do we break this? How do we break this overrunning pattern that has been with us? Is that we need to do something, and we need to do it consistently and frequently in small doses, let it be said, to change that. But we have to be consistent with that, and we have to be committed to that. And the beauty for me is that when we do that, wow, it just changes how we see life, so that lens that we look through is a very different lens. And we begin to understand that actually I am enough. I don't have to be jumping through hoops and doing everything for everyone and making sure everybody else is okay in order to prove that I am enough. I am simply enough. And then if I choose to still help people and I still want to jump through loops, and if I still want to do those things from that place of knowing that I'm enough and knowing that I am making sure my needs are met, so be it. That's a very different picture to be, and a very different place to be operating from, than actually disregarding self for the good of everyone else, in the belief that you're not enough unless you're doing that.
Absolutely. And I would like to leave this discussion with a completely different thought that just popped into my mind. And I think it is a different aspect of seeing the pleaser, especially for the parents out there. The moment you do too much for anyone, in essence, you're taking away their right to develop and do what is good for them. And in a way, it's as if you feel that they are not enough to, or they're not able to do all these things that they could do without your help. So that is food for thought. I'm saying that I think this is probably, you know, like the Greek perspective in some respects, because it is very hard to get our mothers not to do things for us. So there you go.
True.
So something is in there.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting, because that's a bit of mirroring. It's like, if I'm not enough, you can't be enough. But then that's the judge then usually putting in that extra layer of like, you're not, but they're not enough either, so it's okay. So yeah, do things for them, can make the, you know. So it is really, that's a really interesting perspective, and one to keep in mind. I think what I want to leave with is, let us be really, you know, let us always acknowledge what is happening underneath that pattern, because we're not calling these saboteurs out so that people go away feeling bad, or, oh my gosh, that's me, it's awful, and look at me. Oh no, this is about understanding that your essence is built in the most beautiful sage way. That empathy that you have, that ability to love and give, these are beautiful qualities to have. However, when they are overplayed, when they are always externally focused and not internally focused back to self, they are an issue. They become a problem, and they become something that you want to change, because you deserve to acknowledge your enoughness and yourself, period. So I think I'm going to leave on that note. Claudia, thank you so much for joining us and for leaving us messages. And great to have some input from you. We kind of love when people come in and interact, even if it's in the chat. So yeah, let's just remember that all of these saboteurs that we've been talking about, underneath the pattern lies some beautiful sage behaviors that's what we want to amplify, that's what we want to have, but we want to amplify, we don't want to overplay, and I think there's a big difference between the two. So just kind of understanding that, and I will stop there.
Yeah, I think it's a great point to stop, and thank you very much, Yvonne, for one more fabulous discussion. I mean, I can go on for like another hour, but hey.
Oh my goodness, at least.
Let's stop somewhere.
At least, but we're going to stop now. So please, as always, any thoughts, any comments, leave them under the videos. I have had a couple of people contact me directly. Thank you so much. And if you haven't already taken the assessment, when we close out, there's a QR code. You can click on it, takes you straight to the assessment. I can only encourage you to go and take it without judgment.
Absolutely, no judgment.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Evie.
Thank you, Yvonne. Thank you.